Welcome to the final story of our third year. This story is camping on Valentine's Day themed, and it's amazing dress-ups and screen dress-ups. And so our topics today were a few involving animals. So we had older versus younger pets, the tyranny of pets over their human slaves, and animals with special dietary requirements. And then we had a number of things which I roughly grouped under the term plans. First of which was intermittent fault. So it's something that you think is broken, but it works and doesn't work seemingly randomly, especially after you ask for help. It will usually start working so that you can't prove that it's not working. Lost keys, bad or novice campers, unpredictable or non-standard manual cars, and backup systems. And then we had a few on their own. Valentine's Day, which I added in. Daisy petal style decision making is how I've described this thing. So things that people do, like pulling the petals off a daisy, or like tossing something to make a decision. And because it's our final story for the third year, I've added ends that are also beginnings or full circle. So I didn't include as much as I wanted to the outside coming inside in the story. It does come up with some animals, but it doesn't come up quite as much as I would have liked. So I've based the poem on that one. And carrying over to next time is fix it till it's broken. I think Lloyd contributed that one. But I couldn't quite get that one in, although it did seem as though it went well with the others. But here's a poem called Outside In. The outside is making its way in, into our homes, into our cars, into us. Born on the muddy soles of shoes, the entangled straps of bags, our fur, our pet's fur, our skin. It comes in on board words that get to us. It surfs Wi-Fi waves and rushes down telephone signals. It comes in a letter. It creeps through the cracks in walls. It flies in through a hole in the screen door. The outside just keeps coming in, no matter how hard we try to lock it out. Perhaps we should just forgo the walls, the fences, the borders, the barriers, the boxes, the screens. We put them there to hide us from the outside, but we are part of outside, and it is part of us.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Yeah, that's great.
And today's story, I think it might be a bit of a long one. It took me a very long time to write, but maybe I was just being slow. Had too many beers or something.
If at some point I disappear, I'm getting extra tea.
Okay. Very important and very important to the camping theme to keep your tea topped up at all times.
Exactly. Yes.
This is called Struck by Cupid's Beach Ball. We could go camping, said Jen. Just the two of us. It would be fun. Cassie was cleaning out the kitty litter tray, cringing away from the smell. She turned her face to Jen, partly to look at her and partly to look away from the clumping sand. I think Daisy might be allergic to dairy, she said, screwing up her nose and watching the new kitten scratch herself vigorously again. And she's too young to leave with anyone else yet, so if we go camping, we'd have to bring her. I don't want to get her turning into one of those anxious types of cats. Jen climbed over Cassie and the litter tray and squeezed into the small space between the cat tray and the back door, where she started sweeping spilt sand into the dustpan. That's okay, she told Cassie. I know a good campground that allows all kinds of pets. We could get a van so that Daisy can come inside at night and we can have more privacy. My family used to go there when I was a kid, and I'd just spend the whole time meeting everyone's animals. Cassie laughed. shaking clean sand into the tray and spilling more for Jen to sweep up. You haven't changed much, have you, Jen? Then she gave Jen a quizzical look. Is it on the coast? It sounds kind of like the one my family used to go to. Jen raised her eyebrows. It is on the coast, yeah. There's a small port or marina type thing around the corner, and then the campsite, and then the scrub on the other side, so you can go more into the bush if you want to. Cassie put a big clip on the rolled up edge of the kitty litter bag and started washing her hands in the laundry sink. Yeah, that's the one, I reckon. Curvy Bay or something like that. We used to take our pet galah there with us. One year, an entire flock followed him, and when it was time to leave, no one could tell which galah was ours. Except me, of course. She looked a bit wistful and gazed out of the back window at the pepper tree that took up most of the garden space downstairs. Jen had stood up suddenly, almost hitting her head on the sink. She missed her farm at times like these. Oh my God, she exclaimed. I know you. Cassie smirked. I should hope so, Jen. You live here most of the time. We're not really in the habit of letting strangers stay with me. Jen shook her head, exasperated. Cassie didn't know exactly what she meant right away. No, I mean, I already knew you. You're Galah girl from the holidays. I remember you and Crackers the Galah. I can't believe we never worked this out before. Like, how are we exchanging vet inspiration stories and neither of us mentioned the pet parties at the camp barbecue area? Ha, Cassie spluttered. That's ridiculous. We knew each other when we were, what, 5? Were you there when all those galahs turned up? Crackers was supposed to stay home. He'd gone sort of wild anyway, because I sort of let him out of my window when I was a toddler. So the neighbour was just meant to go and put seed out. But I hid him in my backpack. I used to do that sometimes. He was so good and quiet, I guess he'd go to sleep. But when we got there, I let him out behind the tent and he sat on my shoulder. And then all these other galahs started turning up and landing around us. I guess they might have followed from home or just been curious locals. Mum was so unimpressed. But I guess my parents figured Crackers was going to show up one way or another, so we always just brought him along after that. Jen shook her head incredulously. I was there. I was so impressed. How did we lose each other, Cassie? Cassie shrugged. Well, we were 5. I guess after we played together the first time, I assumed you would be there every time we went to that campground. Kid logic. But of course our families didn't always go at the same time. Jen sighed. Yeah, my parents stopped taking us there regularly when we got older, I think. We went on to some different trips. I guess they wanted us to see different places, but I did the same thing wherever we went anyway. I just looked for animals. Cassie snorted. Hey, do you remember that sailor guy, Max, and the lady called Abbey? Jen did. When she'd occasionally paid attention to something other than the animals at the campground, which wasn't all that often, it had usually been because of one of Max's boats came in. Adults weren't normally all that interesting, but Max had caught Jen's eye because of the bowl. Grown-ups didn't normally bounce down the beach kicking rubber balls along the sand, unless they were playing with a kid. Jen had watched and waited, her sandcastle forgotten and being squashed by her knee. She'd been expecting a potential new playmate to appear. But instead, another grown-up ran down the ramp from the campground and jumped to catch the ball, as though an ongoing game of catch or basketball had only been interrupted by her walk up to the long drop toilets. Except Jen knew that wasn't true, because she'd never seen the man with the ball before until that day. This lady was normally with different people. the couple who had the little scruffy dog, the dog who liked to steal everyone's socks. Jen liked to secretly help him. They'd agreed, the dog with a wiggle of his funny spotted nose and Jen with words, to collect a sock from every person staying at the campground that summer. Anyway, that wasn't the point. The point was that the lady, whose name was Abbey, Jen had heard the other adults saying it, normally spent her time telling off the dog for having socks or complaining because the other two grown-ups got to stay in a camper van and she had to take the tent. And sometimes the chickens went into her tent because it was on the ground. Jen didn't understand why she minded. If chickens came into her tent, she would have made them a nest out of her clothes so they could sleep comfortably too. Anyhow, this particular afternoon was very weird because the lady called Abbey never normally played. She mostly told people and animals off. And yet there she was, running onto the sand, catching a ball kicked up by a man who, as far as Jen was aware, she didn't even know. While Jen was watching, Abbey ran over to the man and he picked her up off the ground and spun her around. Jen supposed they probably did know each other then. She'd never talked to Abbey, but she had talked to the dog called Grease in front of Abbey, and that wasn't all that different. So she called out, "Hello, Abbey, who is that person?" Which the man with the bowl seemed to find very funny for some reason. "I'm Max," he told Jen, tossing the ball up in the air. Some bits flaked off of it. Jen's mum had approached them then, all wet from catching waves and wrapped in a big green fluffy towel with stars on it. "Jenny, are you talking to strangers?" she asked, frowning. "No," Jen replied. "I know Abbey from the camp, and this isn't a stranger, it's Max." Mum had frowned some more, but Jen meant what she said. After watching Abbey and Max play with the ball and spin each other round in circles, she'd come to the conclusion that they weren't actually any older than her, at least not on the inside. Then Mum said, "Oh shit, where are my keys?" And Max and Abbey had ended up helping Jen and her dig up half the beach until they eventually found the car keys under where Jen had been sitting the whole time. Mum didn't call Abbey and Max strangers anymore after that. Jen thought that Abbey and Max's ball looked a bit too old and flaky for anyone to be playing with. She expressed this thought to them one afternoon while she was brushing Grease the dog and plotting with Grease how to add one of Max's socks to Grease's collection. At the same time, Mum was washing most of the shirts and underwear in the backup tub. There was a small coin-operated laundry in the common block with the long drops, but the two machines were pretty old and had what Jen's dad sometimes called a bloody intermittent fault. What this meant, as Jen understood it, was that they were much like the vending machines near the football field back home. Sometimes they gave you what you asked for, and other times they just ate your coins. Jen still firmly believed that they would be better behaved if properly trained, but Mum had stopped letting her try to teach them after the first few coins were lost to their whims. Max didn't seem to be offended by Jen's remark about his and Abbey's ball. He replied, "Ah, yes, I can see why you would say that. This ball is very old." Grease the dog began chewing on Max's shoelace, but Max, again, didn't seem bothered. "But we have to keep this ball anyway," he'd said, "because it's very special." "Is it magic?" Jen wanted to know. "Sort of," Max had answered. "I guess you could say that." He winked at Abbey. "It did once travel across the sea all by itself from me to Abbey. I guess maybe it would have to be magic to do that." And then he'd actually reached into his bag and thrown out a sock for grease. Jen had looked at Abby, waiting for her to start yelling. But instead, Abby laughed, which Jen thought was very strange and suspicious behaviour. Back in Cassie's laundry, Cassie was shaking her head and grinning as Jen told the story. That's right, the ball. I really believed it was magic too, because I mean, why else would Abby be so different when it was there? My theory was actually that Max was magical and the bowl was sort of like his wand or a potion that he carried. And like he'd throw it to somebody, and when they caught it, they'd magically feel better and start being happy no matter what. Jen sat on the washing machine and smiled. That's a pretty good theory. I mean, Max did say that thing about being like the tide. Daisy the kitten jumped up beside Jen, and Jen picked her up and stroked her tiny ginger nose. I thought he might be a sort of sea spirit. Did you ever try to do your own magic with the bowl? I definitely tried sneaking it out of the box by their tent and going and throwing it at those washing machines that only worked sometimes to see if it would fix them. Cassie thought about it. Oh no, I did. That's right. She looked a bit embarrassed. You know how some kids in primary school used to write yes and no on something, like an eraser or a pen, and then throw it or roll it like flipping a coin to get an answer about something? Jen grinned. Yes. Some of us continued such absurdities long into high school, I'm afraid. Yeah, well, I used to sneak over at night with a pen, write Y for yes and N for no somewhere on the bowl, and ask it things. The trouble was, half the time, it would stop rolling in a position when neither the Y or the N was showing. Cassie giggled and covered her face. My sister Wilma said that meant I must already know the answer. And did you? Yeah, I guess. Probably one of the few sensible things she said back then. Okay, so we have to go to Curvy Bay for Valentine's Day now, Jen declared. Because technically, it's where we met. Agreed, smiled Cassie. And so it was decided. Jen looked up campervan hire and booked an older model that wasn't too expensive. She'd never had any problems driving manual vehicles. In fact, she found she always felt safer with control of some gears. She tried to remember everything her family used to pack for camping. It had definitely been a while, but she was pretty sure she could cover everything. The trickiest part would be cooking something decently romantic on the barbecue, or using the tiny gas burner in the campervan. So she spent most of her time looking up recipes. On the Friday afternoon before Valentine's Day weekend, Jen and Cassie both finished work early. Cassie lived in town, so she got their packs and a carry case containing Daisy the kitten from her house and walked over to the vehicle hire company. Jen met her there in her car, which was an unusually small choice of vehicle for someone who technically still owned a large property. They collected the keys to the campervan, and Jen gave Cassie the keys to her own car. We can put my car in your car park and then I'll drive us in the van, she announced. The inside of the van looked like every other manual car Jen had driven. She smiled as she buckled the seatbelt and turned over the engine. She did hate unnecessarily large cars, but she had to admit the view from up high in the van felt rather empowering. She glided out of the car park of the hire firm, feeling very smug about how smoothly she was driving the unfamiliar camper van in front of Cassie, and had a very small smirk when she saw Cassie stall her car in the rear view mirror. A few hundred meters down the road, however, Jen's smirk had turned into gritted teeth as she tried to take another turn without turning on the windscreen wipers, spraying the windscreen cleaner, picking the wrong gear position, or hitting the horn, and did all four. Everything in this vehicle was either in the opposite position to normal or an inconvenient position that meant you touched it by accident. She managed to get the indicator on at the last second and got honked at by the car behind, which could have been for her seemingly last-minute turn, or due to the fact that she'd just inexplicably honked at them. Jen finally pulled to the curb outside Cassie's and lay her head on the steering wheel. She'd succeeded in driving this thing a total of a few kilometers, and she already felt exhausted. Cassie pulled up behind in Jen's car and got out. I think you might need to pull it into the driveway next door to be able to turn around, she proposed gently. I don't think it will fit in mine. Jen grimaced. Okay, can you get in? I'm scared I won't be able to see you if you're standing over there. Cassie got in the passenger seat. I'm not sure what the turning circle is going to be like, Jen continued, edging forward and madly hauling on the wheel, hoping to make it up the neighbour's driveway first try. The van turned about half the necessary amount, and Jen swore and hit the brakes to avoid a nicely manicured rosebush. She guided the gear stick to where reverse should have been. It seemed to sit a little too far forward, and when she released it, it clicked back out of place. It took 10 minutes and a lot of Jen yelling before they discovered a small button on the base of the gear stick, which apparently needed to be pressed in before the gear stick could be pushed into the reverse position. Finally, Jen pulled up the neighbour's driveway. She pulled up the handbrake and set the gear stick into neutral. The moment her foot was off the brake pedal, the van began rolling backwards. Jen squawked and jammed the pedal down again. This time, both she and Cassie hauled on the handbrake, and it shifted up what seemed like another foot. Finally, the campervan sat parked. Cassie got their bags and Daisy from Jen's car, and reluctantly, Jen restarted the campervan's motor. Or tried to. The key seemed suddenly to be jammed in the ignition. Jen, said Cassie carefully, would it be so bad to tent it, really? I think it might be kind of cozier. Jen was reluctant to lose the money spent on the van, but when they were unable to release the handbrake, even with both of them working together, she had to agree that a tent camp sounded good. That was proper camping after all, right? Cassie rang her neighbours, who she was luckily friendly with, and got their agreement to leave the campervan where it was. Jen and Cassie hauled everything back into Jen's car and set off again, this time adding a tarpaulin and a small pop-up tent that Cassie had kept since childhood. The first thing that struck Jen as she drove into the camping ground was that there were far more people here than she'd expected. Surely people had dinners and dances and movies and candlelit nights at home to be going to tomorrow. It would probably clear out a bit later on, she thought. A puppy wheeled around the car while Jen headed slowly down the winding track to the site she'd chosen, and Cassie smiled out the window at the dog. Daisy seemed to sense the dog outside and meowed piteously about it. They parked the car and spread out a picnic rug and their things to make Daisy feel at home. Then they let her out to explore while they disentangled the tent. Jen had selected a spot high on the gentle slope and close to the ocean end of the camp, in the hope of beautiful sunset views and fresh sea air. She soon realised, however, why no one else had picked this site, as an enormous gust of wind rushed off of the ocean and pulled the little tent entirely out of their grip, sending it tumbling like a large kite towards a nearby cliff and scaring Daisy, who ran under the car. A figure emerged from a tent a little further away and chased the kite tent down, catching it by one springy tent pole and wrestling with it until someone else raced out to assist. There was something familiar about the way the first figure ran. Jen squinted against the wind. Albie? With Cassie in tow, she trotted up to find her ex-flatmate and close friend, Albie, and his fiancée, Alice, trying to keep hold of the runaway tent fabric. What are you two doing here? Jen and Albie chorused, staring at each other. We thought we'd do a nice, quiet camping couples getaway, Cassie supplied. And you? Same, said Alice, spreading her hands. It seems like a lot of people had the same idea. There was a flutter, and something fought against the wind to pull in and settle on Cassie's shoulder. Hello, Crackers, said Cassie without thinking. Then, Crackers? What are you doing here? Crackers, replied Crackers. Cassie looked around. I have a sinking feeling that this means my whole family's here somewhere. Wait, that's the same galah? Jen spluttered, eyes wide. Oh yeah, they live a really long time. You know that, Jen. He just lives in the general area of my parents' house and sometimes follows them places and joins in with things. Cassie gave Crackers a scratch. Still looking around for the parents she knew were there somewhere. Instead, her eyes alighted on something else. 2 deck chairs in the sun, a crate near them holding what she was sure was the faded pink red of Max and Abby's bowl. She nudged Jen and pointed with her head. Jen's eyes widened. Oh, surely not. Do you really think it could be them? Alice eyed Jen and Cassie's campsite, oblivious to their attention being elsewhere. What sort of tent pegs do you two have for this? She waved their flapping tent at them. As it turned out, very inappropriately small ones. They kept pinging back out of the sandy soil while Jen was trying to hammer them in. Cassie was not much help because Crackers had decided he was hungry and had pestered her until she gave him all the nuts and seeds out of her trail mix, which he was now eating out of her hand. Despite her concerns about getting the tent set up, Jen hit her finger with the hammer 3 times due to looking up at this scene in fascination. Eventually, Albie shook his head. Jen, I think you're going to blow away during the night and wake up in a tree on the other side of camp. Our tent is technically only 3-person, but... Everyone groaned inwardly, but Jen and Cassie didn't especially want to end up blowing off a cliff. So they moved their stuff, and their kitten, to Alice and Albie's campsite, Daisy clawing at Cassie's bikini top in disgust. After Jen had misplaced the car keys, panicked, located them between the car and where the tent had blown in a tuft of salt bush, and exploded a tin of baby corn she was trying to steam on the barbecue. The 4 of them sat under the barbecue shelter, and Cassie and Jen told Alice and Albie about their discovery of their shared past over tinned spaghetti on toast. Crackers and Daisy cautiously tried to make sense of one another under the table, Crackers occasionally aiming a peck at Daisy's exploring paws. As Jen was describing the ancient red ball and commenting that she and Cassie had seen one similar in another camp, Albie nodded in the direction of the camp with the bowl, and everyone civilled in their seats to see an older couple making their way back to the campervan parked behind the deck chairs. Could that be them, he asked. The puppy that had bounced around Jen's car on arrival was wheeling around the couple's legs and yapping, herding the 2 humans like sheep. Jen watched, trying to decide whether these people looked at all how she recalled Abbey and Max looking. It was hard to say. The Abbey she remembered had had short blue-tipped hair and fancy earrings, but those were the sort of things that changed with time. I'm going to go and ask them, she announced, standing up from the picnic table. The others all looked nervous. What? She asked. What's the worst that can happen? She went over to where the couple was settling back into their deck chairs, pulling things from an esky that the puppy was eyeing with interest. Hi, said Jen, feeling a bit silly now. Sorry, excuse my interruption. I just have to know, are you Abbey and Max? The couple looked at each other and laughed, confused. I'm Chen, and this is Ned, the woman answered, as the puppy snatched one of her sandwiches right off her plate. She completely ignored this happening and smiled at Jen, and Ned looked at the dog and chuckled. Oh, sorry. Never mind, Jen blathered, half embarrassed, half smiling at the puppy. She backed away, a strange sense of familiarity about the dog and the deck chairs still tugging at her. Wait a sec. Abbey and Max are our friends' names, said Ned. Could you be looking for them, maybe? Jen stopped. I think so. I'm Jen. I used to come here with my family when I was a little kid, and I kind of think I might have played with your dog. I mean, not this dog. She grinned at the puppy, although he's lovely. But did you have a little dog who stole socks? Ned laughed, sticking his beer can into the holder on the armrest of the deck chair. You mean dear old Grease? Yeah, he loved a sock. Abbey mightily disapproved. Jen grinned. Grease, yes. I'm afraid I used to help Grease steal socks. Both Chen and Ned seemed delighted rather than offended by this, and Jen was encouraged. My girlfriend and I, we realized the other day that we actually met here as kids, and we both remembered this guy Max and the lady called Abbey and this bowl that they had that we all thought had magical powers. And, well, actually, I think it might be that bowl. She pointed. Chen and Ned were smiling and nodding. Galah girl, Cassie, asked Chen. Jen nodded and smiled. Yeah, that's her. Max and Abbey have gone to see the boats off, Ned told her. The ships and smaller boats will leave too early for them to say goodbye in the morning. Does Max still go to sea? Jen breathed, humbled by her connection to these people still existing. Not anymore, said Chen. Max is retiring from being the tide, as he used to put it. Jen sighed. We thought he was a mythical sea magician. We thought he was imaginary, Ned laughed. Took us so many years to finally meet him. Chen watched Jen closely and smiled in a knowing way. Abbey and Max will be here in the morning if you want to pop by, she told her. Thank you. Jen beamed. Then she caught sight of Daisy, whose tail end could be seen hanging out of a large sack, and groaned. Oh no, is that dog food? She'll throw up in the tent. She hauled a protesting Daisy out by the waist and mumbled an apology to Chen and Ned as she hefted the cat, who she could have sworn was actually heavier, back to the barbecue area. 4 people in a 3-person tent means 4 things. 1, no sleep. 2, elbowing each other in the face. 3, being bounced on the air mattress whenever anyone turns over. And 4, being boiling. Having a kitten with a dairy allergy who has eaten a pile of dog food with dairy in it in a 3-person tent with 4 people in it means 4 things too. 1, listening to the sound of scratching all night until you get up and hide half an antihistamine tablet in some tuna and return to the tent smelling of fish. 2, vomit on your sleeping bag. 3, cat poo on your sleeping bag. 4, no sleep. Also, Your friends do not like you so much anymore, and their patience is wearing thin regarding your presence in their tent. This was the night Jen had had, when what sounded like an old-fashioned battery-powered radio started up right outside the tent fly at 5 a.m. It's crackers, mumbled Cassie sleepily, her hair over her whole face and getting into her mouth. He wants to come in. Jen did not feel like being in a tent with a galah, 3 humans, and a smelly cat, so she went outside. Take out the rubbish, ordered Crackers. And then he proceeded to push past Jen into the tent and land on Cassie's face, a bit of eucalyptus branch in his beak. Jen went down to the beach. There, sitting on the sand, their toes in the white water, were 2 older adults with a crumbly red bowl. Jen stopped and looked at them for a moment. Then she had an idea. Hello, Abby. Who is that person? She said, walking towards them. Abby turned, and it seemed to Jen that she looked very little different. Jenny, she laughed. Chen said you were here, with galah girl Cassie of all people. Jen nodded. Are you really retiring from being the Tide, Max? Max looked up at her, and Jen could see that he was both joyful and sad about it. It's not a forever job, Jen, he told her. It's wild out there sometimes. Mother Earth tells you when to stop. Jen sat down on the sand beside them. But wilderness is wonderful, she said. Max nodded and ummed, and then, as the sun rose and turned the sea turquoise, he told her all about the wilderness. Cassie found Jen in the dunes later, pulling the petals off of a daisy. Rolling the magic red ball, are you, my Valentine, she said, putting an arm around Jen's shoulders. Jen just nodded, her gaze focused far out on the point where the water met the sky. You want to go and meet what's out there, Cassie murmured, leaning her head on Jen's shoulder. Jen nodded again, just a tiny nod, and took Cassie's hand, her eyes still watching the waves. They came back to camp at what Albie declared to be brunch time. Cassie's mum was sitting with Alice, Albie, Chen, Ned, Abbey, Max, Crackers, and Daisy. The later 2 in her lap. Hello, Cassie. Nice to see you again, Jen. Your neighbour called Cassie and said they haven't been able to go anywhere in their car because the camper van is in their way and they don't have the keys for it. Oh, shit, sighed Jen. Oh, shit, agreed Crackers. Crackers likes to say, oh, shit, explained Cassie quietly. We're headed back to town, so if you have the keys here, we could take them to the neighbour, Cassie's mum offered. The keys were located, tangled up in the useless pop-up tent, and Cassie's mum took off. Jen wants to go to sea, Cassie announced, while her mother was idling with the window down. Crackers, said Crackers. Then he ducked in through the window and sat on the passenger seat in Cassie's dad's lap. Ah, well, there's a whole world out there, Cassie's dad said. Albie offered Cassie a burrito. After the car had faded into the distance, Jen and Cassie sat down on their picnic rug, and a silence fell, or what passes for silence when you're in the bush, which is mostly the sound of flies and grass. Max and Abby wandered off somewhere and didn't come back for a little while. Jen noticed that the red bowl had been put in its own special box in the crate by their van. Suddenly, there was something in the air above them, and Jen and Cassie scrambled up, spilling salad. Cassie, came Abby's voice. Cassie blinked and put her hands up instinctively to catch the object. a shiny, new, deep red beach ball. Tag, said Max. You're it.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
That's fabulous.
That was great. That was really good. What a nice atmosphere. Like it just gave me a very good, summertime camping feeling.
Yeah.
That's real nice. This isn't quite the
Amazing.
right kind of bird, but there is this
that's
filter.
I love it.
Fine.
Very cute.
Not
That-
quite right.
That was amazing tie-ins of all the
Yeah.
characters from the eras. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. It took quite some working out about like who was how old. Because previously I've just kind of avoided certain groups meeting because I'm not quite sure whether they're the same age or what. And last time in our end of year story, when Zaman went traveling and he saw lots of different people from different stories, that was an interesting one because it caused some people to be kind of a bit of an anomaly in that they shouldn't have been the age they were when Zaman saw them. Right. Because he also saw like Betty as an old lady and stuff. So when I was typing up last year's book, I ended up having to change the descriptions of some of the people he saw on his trip so that they would be the right age. But the one person I can't quite reconcile is Pandora, who like appears in places, too many places, because she was in the share house of Chen and Ned, so that suggests she's close in age to them, but she's also met Florrie, and actually Ella and that are an older generation.
Time Lord.
But I feel like
she's a time. Well,
I was gonna say, if anyone is, it would be Pan. Like that seems consistent with that character. So
that's my thought.
I think so.
I mean, in my little diagram that I drew, I've sort of put in her in and Zaman as well, which his name means time, so that's like age, sort of like a particular era sort of thing. So that sort of makes some sense, but I put them in like an in-between sort of age group where like, yes, Pan was living in the share house going to uni, but she'd only just started and the others had been there, several years already, so they are older than her by somewhat.
One of those people who just has a really indeterminate age, like you think they're a really different age to what they actually are, which that seems like that would happen. You're either thinking they're much older than they are or much younger than they are, or both. Or,
but also like Ella and Bryn versus Betty and Barb, there's actually quite a big age difference. They're all old ladies in the story where they go to the convention center and the LARPing happens and all of that, but they're not all the same age old ladies. They're just all retirees,
right?
Because I think
well, that is a very wide bracket. So
one of them says, I'm turning 90 soon, and the rest are just spring chickens because like
that's right.
One of them's only like 75 or something.
Exactly.
There's a wider spread than is captured just by going this lot of this generation. But I was very pleased when I worked out that Cracker's Cassie was the same generation as Jen, and therefore she could be the same Cassie. Because I'd just used that name before. That's
great. That's really good. I like that a lot.
I think somebody called Pandora is quite likely to be a bit magical anyway. But if you've met those kind of people,
sorry, please, sorry, I'm just
playing.
Else is in here.
Got some of those at a garden party.
Exactly.
I think also, there are people that you meet at 14 and they look very little different to when you meet them at 25 or 38 or 47.
Oh dear. A shark. We can't have sharks at our
Oh
beach.
wait, here we go. Here we go.
Oh,
Perfect.
Thank you.
Mum,
Perfect.
Mum, you need to put one of these on.
I would if I knew how.
Yeah, I'll have to show you sometime.
yeah.
Sorry.
We-
I was interrupting.
We'll
with
have to
all
have a
my-
lesson about how to put on
Sorry.
these effects.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
And if there are
Sorry.
more, if there's more than one person in the shop, does it give you all a thing, or does it only sort of
Oh.
work it out if there's only one
That's a
person?
I
good
don't know.
question.
I don't know.
So there's a couple of things I wanted to do today in our chat. Obviously, first we want to have some requests for Storytime birthday story. What things you'd like to have in that story? Oh, it's got a little celebratory party popper there.
Oh, yay! Very good.
Then I wanted to sort of pick everybody's brains here a little bit at the ideas for the title of book 3. I was thinking about some kind of play on the phrase "the ties that bind." So I looked at what stories are in this collection, and I think that something about bringing different people together. There are lots of stories in this collection that have old characters like meeting other characters and new connections being made.
Ooh,
That'd be great.
I have a thought, but it's mostly relevant to this most recent story, but I wonder if it would be at all relevant to others. But you could call it the tides that bind.
Oh, I like that.
That
Does
is
that
nice.
Make some suggestions about journeys and faraway places and wilderness.
Yeah, that's cool. I've always had some kind of tea related bit to the title.
Oh,
Yeah, that's true.
But I think the teas that bind is somehow a little bit corny, even though like it shouldn't,
it's
because
not
like
quite the
that's
same.
sort of part of the idea in Storytime, that like the sharing of the tea brings us all together, but it just doesn't quite sound nice.
No.
Bruise that wind?
Well, the what? Sorry.
The bruise that wind?
Oh, the
Ooh,
bruise
yeah.
that bind.
Things that
Even the
bind.
bruise that bind would be okay, because you
That's
get
true. The bruise
alliteration.
that bind is good. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, that is
like
nice.
that.
actually.
That might be a winner.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. I think I've answered that question.
Great. Very nice.
That didn't take very long.
Efficient.
It wasn't really like a full-on brainstorm or anything, was it? It was like,
That's true. Well, I think
That's
you started with a good point. Like you knew
Yeah.
where you were going with it already, so that's good.
And then I think in the next story, we better have some other kinds of brews other than teas.
Okay, yeah.
That sounds good.
yes.
Yeah.
In terms of story suggestions and on that potential theme, what about having a
I'm
Don't take
sorry,
it. Don't
Dr.
take it.
Claire, we can't take you seriously.
It's so good. No, I love it. I feel like it's very serious, actually.
Very
Okay.
serious bear.
What does
Hang
the
on.
adorable bear have to say now?
okay.
the bear would suggest that thinking of brews and further stories. So what about having a brew from someplace foreign and you can't decipher the title of it? And Sarah will know.
Oh yeah.
Oh, lovely.
That's fun.
Oh, yeah.
hmm
Surely Pandora's box of tea fits in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't a box, was it? A drawer?
It was a drawer.
Yeah, she had a
yes,
special
she had a
drawer, yeah.
drawer. Except she doesn't have the drawer anymore. So it depends
No,
at what point in
okay.
time we are with Pandora.
Yeah.
Although Pandora is a time traveler, as we
That's
know.
true.
So we can squeeze her in
You could
anywhere.
change it. You could have something that is similar or representative of such a thing.
Yes.
Pandora
Yeah, well,
might have
she did replace the drawer with a box or something. And at the
Something
end
like that,
of
yeah.
that story, she was. It wasn't really the same stuff, but there was stuff she brought in as part of their celebratory dinner, and she ended up like collecting it all and doing the same thing essentially.
There's a tea drawer now, or a tea box.
Yeah.
Has there already at some point been a request? I feel like this seems vaguely familiar. And if so, I have an alternate version. But has there been a request for getting the lyrics of a song wrong for a really long time? Like thinking,
we
has
did
that already
like,
happened?
Yeah, we did like mishearing, like the general idea of mishearings and misinterpretations of things.
Right.
So young
Yes, I thought that
Alina
might have already
and her
happened.
sister did do some mishearings of lyrics.
Mhm.
Yeah. But that is a very fun one, and I think that
It is fun.
and I
what
would
about
like to
as
get
a-
that Fix It Till It's Broken that Lloyd
Yeah,
suggested
that's a
last
great
time, 'cause it's a
idea.
very good topic.
It is a very good one. Okay, what as an alternative that's sort of similar, when someone makes or you hear like a play on words or like a pun, or you hear the title for something and it's presented in such a way that it must be a pun, but you just don't get
you don't
what
get
it's
it.
about.
Don't get why
like you
it's a
don't
pun.
understand why it's funny.
Yeah.
It seems like a weird combination of words.
Oh, that used to happen to me all the time, mainly
I
with
get
like
that quite a
other
lot.
people thinking things were like innuendo things, and I'd be
and you just
I don't understand.
I don't understand it. Yeah, it happens to me most with brands, like where a brand
they've named it
of
to
a
like
product will
sound
be
like a
named
certain...
something, and you're just kind of like, I don't. They must be doing a play on words, because why would you call something this? But it doesn't make any sense.
Maybe the ice cream beer fits in that.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it does.
It. Yeah,
maybe it has like a meaning in German. There's like a saying, and it has something. Yeah, that could be possible.
Yeah,
because those are like the last things you learn. You don't know idioms and stuff from another language. So it was entirely possible that it is some kind of.
This could tie into a thing Mum and I talked about today, because we were at my house, and on the TV, because I have just a thing where it shows random photos from Google of different places, and it showed an aerial photo that said it was somewhere in Germany, and it was like a coastal image. And it sort of occurred to me that I had never thought about beaches in Germany. And so then we were talking about places that didn't have a border on a beach. But then I was thinking that could be an interesting theme, like parts of places that are not part of their stereotype. So, you know, like,
you just don't, you just sort of
don't
assume when you think of a place that it doesn't include
whatever it is.
But they do have things. Exactly. It's sort of like, I don't know, you're thinking of somewhere, like, to me, thinking about when you went to Iceland, right?
Yeah.
And thinking of supermarkets in Iceland.
Yes.
Was very weird. But you
weird.
went to the supermarket and bought like baby potatoes and stuff. And I was like,
exactly. That's it.
Supermarkets.
That's it. Yeah. So things like that, where you're like, oh wait, such and such place must have whatever it is. You just never think about it. No one ever talks about that. It's not on postcards.
I got one, Sarah. What about the one where you, you know, like I talk to animals, and there's an embarrassing one on the beach where our dog was interacting with their dog, and I talked for our dog to the lady.
Yes.
Said, I'll talk to your dog, but not you.
Yes.
Because the two dogs were greeting each other and ignoring the people. So Barry was like being
the voice of the dogs. But the people didn't necessarily understand.
I'll talk to your dog, but not to you. And we walked away. You know, the lady took very well and everything. We walked away, and I said, actually, that sounded really rude. I think that lady's going to think, you know, you're kind of saying, back off, lady. I'm not interested in one of your dogs.
I will just talk to the dog, thank you.
Yeah. We're not here for you. You know.
That's so good.
So what
dogs with people names?
Dogs with people names.
Like as well, my neighbours across the road, for some reason, and they maintain that they didn't think of this when they chose it, have named their very mischievous dog Emily. So when the dog gets out, I just hear Emily. Emily. It's really strange.
I turned up, Sarah, my friend in Peterborough, we used to listen to this radio program called The Naked Vicar Show. Yeah. And in the program there was, you know, mum and or various people, but there was a chap called Bruce. And I don't know, Bruce is perfectly all right, but in the end, usually the end of the program was mum or someone would say, Bruce, and then they say, piss off. Because, you know, Bruce got on people's nerves. Right. So my friend Fran called her cat Bruce with the understanding, not that she would just call him Bruce. And Bruce, but we knew it was an in-joke because it was like, you know, he could be a bit annoying. It's like lost. Bruce.
Oh, that's so good.
You have to say the rest.
I love it.
Yeah, that's so have interesting names for pets that are like that, where that's like related to some kind of common television show or book or something that you know with your friends, and you know there's like another bit to the name or something that always gets said to that character, and therefore
me calling my bird Marilla.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, no, but it's not called Marilla. It's called Marilla, which is even funnier.
Yes. Marilla.
Yes, it's a whole story.
It has.
But let's hear it.
Yes.
Do you want to try explaining
Marilla
the story, Mum, or do you want me to explain it? Yeah, from the
Ellen Montgomery books.
Yes, but the reason it has two names is because at some point there were 2 or 3, probably only 2 birds. And I couldn't tell which one was which.
They looked the same, yeah.
They just looked the same. So I thought, well, one of them's Marilla, or maybe that's Marilla. Okay, I'll just call them both Marilla.
Yeah. So when there was just the 2 of them left, Mum would say like the Marillas. Yeah. As a collective term for these 2 birds that looked the same.
Unfortunately, I only have 1 left now.
Yeah.
I still call her Marilla.
Marilla. What's her name?
What about language? It reminds me a bit of Marilla, where it makes no sense, but when you say it, it makes sense. So I'll try and give an example. I'll use Marilla. So say you were trying to work out which bird was the Marilla. You're going, oh, that's the Marilla.
Oh, yeah.
Like
emphasis. Yes. There are heaps of examples of things
that
like
happens a lot.
It does.
We used to do that all the time when Emily was younger.
You're right. Well, I think we did it heaps in our family, yeah.
When you're going camping and you've gone like out on a day trip and you say, are we going home now? And one of you is like, home or home? Like to the
Yes, that's it. Yeah, where you just repeat. It's usually repeating the word, isn't it? It's just like you repeat the word, a second time to indicate that you're meaning a specific one of that thing.
Yeah. Just going back to Dad's comment about like I'll talk to your dog but not to you. So are you saying like embarrassing things that happen because you talk for animals, or
yes, that's right, that's exactly what it is.
When you get yourself sort of in a pickle by doing the voice of an animal or something else. Okay.
One of my friends, he has a dog, and for whatever reason he's got in the habit of like winking at his dog, and then he started winking at other people's dogs, and then realizing he winked at the attractive young woman running.
Oh no,
that's great. Oh, no.
Andrew's managed to get a shot.
Great. That's very good.
My idea is when you recommend something to friends, but it's been a while since you've seen it or done it. Oh. And so then when they do it based on your expectation, you're really embarrassed by what you actually like.
Barry had a good one of those, a really good one of those. When he took me out for the first time in Adelaide, he went back to a restaurant which had been pretty zappy when he'd been there, years before. And when we went, I think we were the only people there. And that was probably because they were doing major renovations and there were like those go props and things holding up bits of ceiling.
It shouldn't even have been open.
It
Shouldn't have been.
No.
was seriously hideous.
Oh, well.
Andrew and Janie
It was nice.
are in the grass.
Oh, they've disappeared in the
become
grass. Oh, my gosh.
I don't know how I did it.
ants. Yeah, I think you've put a background on, but your camera's having trouble seeing where
It's
you
like
are.
doing it back to front, where they have been filled in with the background rather than the other way around or something.
I think it just can't detect where they are because it's
Yeah.
quite
I
dark.
can't because his house is so dark.
Yeah.
Oh, you might have to have a movie night in your story then, I reckon.
A movie night. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
with recollections of what's your favourite movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your favorite?
Like
yeah.
discussing your favorite
characters.
movies and why.
when you were little and stuff.
Yeah.
The characters asking each other about their favourite movie.
They don't translate sometimes. My favourite one is full of stereotypes. It's called Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh,
brilliant.
yeah.
I think
Well,
most
you know,
of the
aging
people
well.
here now know about that because if they
Yeah.
didn't know
Yeah.
before, we've already like told them or made them watch it.
The thing is, I loaned it to Tim and he didn't get it at all.
You didn't get
There
it.
you go.
Oh,
No.
okay.
There
He
you go.
didn't because he doesn't understand or know enough about the rock and the
About
pop genre.
That
He
genre
didn't
music.
pick up all of the funny things that are in the film that
Yeah.
are aimed at people who know those things. You know,
But
so he missed
like things like the Goes to
the
11.
Beach Boy connections. He missed all the
Oh,
things that, you
Because
know.
I didn't necessarily pick up those specific things. I just found it funny in general, like, you know, people trying to sort of be celebrities and like what you have to do to be in a band. You know, you have to be a certain way. And
Has anyone seen Amélie, the French movie Amélie?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great film.
So
Amélie.
I had this great conversation. This could be a fun thing. I had this great conversation with a friend the other week. We were talking about that movie and he was saying, oh yeah, I liked it, but it annoyed me. I felt like it was an annoying plot. And I was like, oh, okay. Why did it annoy you? And he was like, well, because she never got her comeuppance. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, the story was that she was like meddling in all of these other people's lives and like making trouble for them, and she never like gets in trouble for it. And I was like, oh, I mean, I guess you could see how it was, that's the story, but that's
Oh.
definitely not my
Not
understanding.
your
of what
story,
it's
no.
about.
Yeah.
I thought she was making everyone's lives better.
Yes, well, she is, but she ends up kind of doing it awkwardly. And so his interpretation was like, yeah, she just like is a busybody and really causes all this trouble, and then no one ever tells her off. And he found it really annoying. I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Weird. But yeah, that could be a fun one of like two people who watch the same movie, but they get totally different ideas about it. Where they're like,
Okay,
oh, this
yeah,
was a movie
yeah.
about such and such. And the other person
But
is
they
like, no,
don't
the moral of the story was this, right? Like they have totally different interpretations of what the movie was about.
Now that is hilarious because the other night Barry and I
No, that-
decided we'd watch a film. Oh, okay, we'll watch this Australian film. So on SBS or whatever it is, there's
Made in Tasmania.
you get a little write-up. So this one's set in Tasmania,
Mhm.
and somebody who's lost his job in journalism in Melbourne or Sydney or something has decided to go home, be with his family, and to follow his passion for cricket and write up a cricket story based on some of the great Tasmanian cricketers. So,
Right.
oh,
Okay.
Yep.
Mm.
what it turned out to be was actual clips of this person's real life. So we were sort of 10 minutes into watching it. I said to Barry, wow, this is incredibly natural. Conversation, I said, I think this is not being fully scripted. It's definitely
Like
ad-libbed.
improvised.
That's just like sitting in someone's living room and listening to their conversation, you know. And it transpired, you know, after about like 45 minutes, Barry started to go.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, no, it's going to change in a minute.
It'll get interesting.
You know, I've said to Barry, there's an example of the blurb being
Mm.
really a misrepresentation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
or book
Definitely.
or whatever is about, and that
Yeah.
that can be a trap too. You know?
Yeah.
It
Okay.
is.
But
Well,
this was very fun. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your suggestions and your Australian slang.
That was great.
And helping me work out the title of the third collection of Storytime stories, which is
Yeah.
now complete. Next month on 13th, I will see you for Storytime's 3rd birthday celebration. We've got some great topics for the story. We might also play a few little games and things. I wondered actually whether between now and then you'd like to circulate a folding story that everyone who does Storytime at any point would just do a bit in the folding story. And I was thinking, you may use any Storytime characters or context in your bit.
That sounds good.
Be a disaster.
Like it could be, it will probably be a big mess.
Right.
But at least it'll be an in-joke big mess. Won't it?
That's right. It will be a Storytime relevant big mess.
Yeah, that sounds good.
If you're keen to do that over the next course of next month, do a folding story with a bit from everybody. I'll send a document round, and someone will have to volunteer to start. I mean, I can write an opening. I guess that can be my contribution, but I don't know. Maybe I should do the end. I'm not sure.
True, maybe.
Anyway, I'll circulate that, and we might do another one of those fill in the blanks ones.
That's
where
fun.
like give me an object or a
that's good.
An action or whatever.
That's a fun game. I like that one.
We'll just make a short little bit because that did go quite well. I liked the Stoby poles being cut. What were they covered in?
I
remember
think
now. Oh, icing, something.
Icing.
Yeah, that's right.
It was. If you have cute photos either of things that you dressed up in or of cute animals, please send them into the chat so that we can have a little gallery of our theme today. It will be fun.
Meredith's an official Storytime member.
Yeah, I think she definitely is that. All right. Great. So I will see you on the 13th of March. Okay. But whether you're at home or with other people, do cake and things. So we can share a cake and do a happy birthday to Storytime.
Yes,
sounds great.
And reminder about dress ups, because I'm gonna try and make a little prize for the most convincing Storytime character at the next one. All right,
sounds good.
Excellent.
I will see you then.
Bye.
Thank you very much,
everybody.
Bye bye.